The desert stretched beneath a sky bruised purple with twin moons, its dunes rolling like frozen waves under the glow of dying starfire, littered now with the shattered husks of alien warcraft and the scorched remains of human armor. Smoke curled in thin, acrid spirals, clinging to the heat-hazed air, and the only sounds were the groan of cooling metal, the distant wail of a wounded sky-scorcher, and the crunch of boots on crushed obsidian glass. Commander Vera of the Azure Dominion, her skin a deep, luminous blue like the heart of a glacier, her long hair cascading in waves of sapphire silk down her armored back, stood atop the fractured remains of a hover platform, her 6 fingers clenched around the hilt of her pulse scythe, trembling not from exhaustion but from the impossible sight before her. There, in the center of the carnage, knelt a human. A soldier, young, dust-caked, his armor dented and half-melted from plasma fire, his face streaked with grime and blood, but it was what he held that froze her soul. Cradled against his chest, limp and bleeding from a jagged gash across her thorax, was her daughter, Princess Lysara, her only child, the heir to the throne of 1,000 sons. The girl who had once laughed as she chased comet tails through the crystalline gardens of the celestial spire, who had begged for a pet sky whale and wept when one died in the lunar orchards. Now she was broken, and the human, this creature of fragile bones and limited lungs, held her like she was the most precious thing left in the universe. He didn't look like a warrior. His eyes were wide, not with triumph or malice, but with a raw, staggering terror that mirrored her own. His hands, calloused and trembling, pressed against the wound with a strip of torn fabric from his own tunic, the blue dye of Lysara's blood staining it crimson. He wasn't shouting. He wasn't raising a weapon. He was whispering. Vera could hear nothing, but she saw his lips move, saw the way his brow furrowed as if each word were carved from his very breath. "Hold on," he murmured again and again, as if saying it could stitch her back together. Around them the battlefield was still. The remaining Azure soldiers had frozen, their weapons lowered, their bioluminescent eyes wide with disbelief. The human reinforcements, battered and bleeding, had halted at the edge of the crater, unsure whether to advance or retreat. No one moved, no one dared, because the princess was not just a royal. She was the last of the Azure bloodline. Her death meant the end of their civilization's lineage. And yet, here was a human, a creature they had called savage, barbaric, unworthy of breath, holding her like a mother holds a sleeping child. Vera descended slowly, her armor clicking with each step, the sound echoing like a funeral bell across the silent dunes. Her guards followed, their weapons still raised but their stances uncertain, their queen's presence a silent command to hold fire. The human looked up as she approached, his face pale beneath the grime, his lips cracked, his eyes brown, warm, impossibly human, locking onto hers with a gaze that did not beg for mercy, but demanded understanding. He didn't speak. He didn't plead. He simply shifted Lysara slightly, adjusting her head against his shoulder, as if afraid she might slip away if he moved too fast. One of Vera's attendants, a silver-haired medic named Trelise, stepped forward, her own skin glowing faintly with emergency bioluminescence. "My queen," she whispered, voice trembling. "The wound, it's deep." The plasma blade pierced her core vein. "Without the regeneration chamber, she will not survive more than an hour." The human flinched as if struck. His breath hitched. There's a med kit," he said, his voice rough, broken, but clear. "In my pack. Left side. There's a blue canister. It's for internal burns. Human field tech. I don't know if it'll work on her, but it's all I have." He didn't ask for permission. He didn't wait. He reached behind him with one hand, slow and deliberate, and pulled free a dented metal case, its surface scorched and half buried in sand. He held it out, his arm shaking, his eyes never leaving Vera's. "I didn't kill her," he said. "I found her like this. She was trying to shield a human child, from the blast. She didn't have to. She could have flown away. But she didn't." Vera stared. The words did not compute. Her daughter, princess of the Azure Dominion, trained from birth to see humans as pests, as pests to be exterminated in the name of planetary purity, had shielded a human child? From the very weapon her own people had unleashed, the desert wind howled, carrying the scent of ozone and burnt flesh. And for the first time in 3 centuries of war, Vera felt the ground beneath her feet crack open. She had ordered this battle. She had believed the humans were a plague. She had watched her soldiers burn their cities, dismantle their farms, erase their histories. She had told herself it was survival. But now, holding the lifeless form of her daughter in the arms of the enemy she had sworn to destroy, she understood. She had not been defending her people. She had been burying them. She took the medkit. Her fingers brushed his. For a heartbeat, their skin touched, hers cool and smooth as polished sapphire, his warm and rough with calluses and dried sweat. Neither pulled away, neither spoke. The medic moved forward, her hands swift and precise, opening the canister. Inside, a viscous blue gel pulsed faintly, emitting a soft, rhythmic hum. "It's a neural regenerator," Trelise murmured, her voice barely audible. "It doesn't heal tissue. It stabilizes biosignatures. It's crude, but it's designed for human biology." Vera didn't hesitate. She pressed the nozzle to Lasara's wound. The gel seeped into the flesh like liquid starlight, glowing brighter as it spread, the jagged edges of the burn beginning to knit together with impossible speed. Lasara's eyelids fluttered. A gasp escaped her lips. Not a cry, not a moan, but something softer. A breath. Alive. The battlefield did not cheer. It did not weep. It simply held its breath. Vera turned to the human. "Your name," she said, her voice low, trembling with something deeper than anger. "What is your name?" He swallowed. His throat moved. "Chiron," he said. "Chiron Voss." She did not know the sound of it. It was not a name from the ancient lexicons of the Azure. It was not melodic, not ornate. It was short, honest, like the sound of a stone hitting water. "Chiron Voss," she repeated, as if testing the weight of it. "You saved her." He looked down at Lasara, at the way her fingers now twitched against his chest, at the faint pulse of blue light beneath her skin. "I didn't save her," he said quietly. "She saved me. I was running. I was supposed to be dead. But she threw herself in front of the blast. I didn't even know she was there until I heard her scream." Vera closed her eyes. She remembered the reports. The human resistance had been pushed to the edge of the desert. Their last stronghold, a crumbling outpost called Dusthaven, had been overrun 3 days prior. The Azure fleet had been sent to cleanse the region. Lasara had volunteered for the front line. She had wanted to prove herself, to be more than a princess, to be a warrior, and instead she had become a shield. "She told me once," Vera whispered, more to herself than to him, "that humans were loud." They sat in silence for a long time. The wind whispered through the ruins. Somewhere a desert fox howled. Then Lasara said, "Do you think, if we had met before the war, would you have liked me?" Chiron turned to her. "I would have bought you a drink, and then I would have asked you why you were so angry." She blinked. "Angry? You were. You still are. You're angry because they told you to hate us. But you didn't. Not really." She looked at him. "What if I'm not supposed to be angry anymore?" He didn't answer. He just reached out, slowly, and took her hand. Vera stepped forward. They both looked up. "I have a question," Vera said. They waited. "Why?" she asked, her voice quiet, trembling. "Did you not kill him when you had the chance?" Lasara looked at her mother. "Because he was crying." Vera frowned. "Crying?" "Yes, he was holding the child. And he was crying. He didn't know I was there. He thought I was dead. He was crying because he thought he'd failed." Vera's breath caught. "And that stopped you?" Lasara nodded. "I realized I'd never seen a human cry before. I thought they were all loud, all angry, all violent. But he was just broken. And I didn't want him to be alone." Vera sat down beside them. She did not touch them, but she sat. And for the first time in her life, she did not feel like a queen. She felt like a mother. The next morning, Chiron was gone. They found his boots outside the tent. His uniform, his poetry book, his medkit, all left neatly folded. On top of them, a single note, written in careful, smudged handwriting. I'm sorry. I can't stay. I'm not your kind. I'm not hers. I'm just a soldier who got lucky. But if you ever need someone to read poetry to your daughter, I'll come back. Lasara stood in the desert wind, the note in her hands, her face pale. Vera did not speak. 3 days later, the Azure Dominion issued a public decree. The war was over. The borders were opened. The humans of Dusthaven were granted citizenship under the Azure Charter. And Princess Lasara, heir to the throne, was declared unfit for command. Not because of her injuries, but because she had fallen in love with a human, and she refused to let him go. She left the palace. She traveled to the human settlements. She learned their language, their songs, their food, their stories. She sat in their markets. She ate their bread. She held their babies. She danced with their elders under the stars. And every night, she looked up at the sky and whispered, "Come back." Vera did not stop her. She watched from afar. She sent supplies. She sent healers. She sent letters, short, stiff, formal letters about trade agreements and cultural exchanges. But beneath the words, she wrote things like, "I miss your laughter. I miss the way you used to steal my dessert when you thought I wasn't looking." And then, one evening, as the twin moons rose again, casting silver light over the borderlands, a figure appeared on the horizon. He walked alone. No armor, no weapons, just a satchel over his shoulder, a book in his hand, and a quiet step that had learned the rhythm of the desert. Lasara was sitting on a hill, her legs crossed, her hair loose, her skin glowing faintly in the moonlight. She didn't turn. She didn't speak. He sat beside her. "I brought you a new book," he said. She looked at him. "I thought you were never coming back. I didn't think you'd still be here. I didn't think you'd come." He smiled. "I didn't think I'd be brave enough." She reached out, took his hand. "I'm not asking you to be brave," she said. "I'm asking you to stay." He looked at her, at the way her eyes shimmered, at the way her fingers trembled, at the way she still smelled like ozone and desert lilies. "I'm not a prince," he said. "I know," she whispered. "I'm not a soldier anymore. I know. I'm just me." "I know," she said again, and then she leaned in and kissed him. It was not a royal kiss. It was not a ceremonial kiss. It was the kiss of two broken things, finally found. Vera watched from the ridge above, hidden in the shadows of a ruined watchtower. She did not move. She did not interfere. She did not cry. But when they pulled apart, when Chiron's hand brushed her cheek and Lasara laughed, really laughed, the way she used to when she was 7 and chasing comet tails, Vera turned away. And for the first time in her life she smiled. Not as a queen, not as a warrior, but as a mother who had lost her daughter and found her again. The wedding was not grand. It was not in the celestial spire. It was not beneath the crystal chandeliers of the royal hall. It was on the edge of the desert, where the sand met the sky, beneath a canopy of woven human lanterns and azure bioluminescent vines. The guests were few. A handful of human elders, a few azure diplomats who had dared to come, the medic Trelise, and a child, now 9 years old, who had once sat on rubble and called Lasara pretty. Chiron wore a simple tunic of blue silk, woven by Lasara's own hands. Lasara wore a gown of woven light, shifting colors like the desert at dawn, her hair braided with silver threads that glowed when she moved. Vera stood at the front, not as a queen, but as a mother. She held no scepter. She held only a single flower, a desert rose, the last one to bloom in the ruins of Dusthaven. When the priest, half human, half azure, chosen because he had once been a soldier on both sides, asked if anyone would object, there was silence. Then, a voice. "Wait!" Everyone turned. A young soldier stepped forward, one of Vera's own. His name was Rin. He was barely 20. He had lost his brother in the war. "I object," he said, his voice shaking. The crowd held its breath. Vera did not move. Rin looked at Chiron. "You saved her life," he said. "But you didn't save mine. My brother died because of humans like you." Chiron didn't flinch. He didn't look away. "I know," he said. Rin's eyes filled with tears. "Then why are you here?" Chiron looked at Lysara, then back at Rin. "Because I'm not here because I'm a human," he said. "I'm here because I'm a man who learned that love doesn't come with borders. And I'm here because I want to be the reason you don't have to lose anyone else." Rin stared at him. Then slowly he bowed his head. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Chiron nodded. "I forgive you." And then he took Lysara's hand. The priest smiled, and the ceremony continued. They did not exchange rings. They did not speak vows. They simply stood there in the desert under the twin moons and held each other. And when the wind blew, it carried the scent of lilies. And when the stars blinked, it was as if the universe itself had whispered, "Yes." 3 months later, Lysara was pregnant. The doctors were stunned. The council was in chaos. The Azure had never conceived with humans. It was impossible. It was forbidden. It was miraculous. She carried the child for 10 months. She grew stronger. Her energy returned. Her skin glowed brighter. And on the day the child was born, beneath a sky streaked with auroras, she held a tiny, perfect being in her arms, blue-skinned, with hair like spun moonlight and eyes that shimmered gold. The child cried, and Chiron wept. Vera held them both. And when the child reached up and touched her cheek with a tiny, sticky finger, Vera did not pull away. She kissed it and whispered, "Welcome home, little star." They called her Naila. It meant the one who bridges. And when she was old enough to walk, she would run between the desert and the palace, laughing, her golden eyes sparkling, her blue hair catching the light. And sometimes on quiet nights, when the twin moons hung low, you could hear her singing. Not an azure lullaby, not a human hymn, but a song that was neither. And it was the most beautiful thing the galaxy had ever heard. The war was over. The borders were gone. And love, quiet and stubborn and strange, had won. Not with weapons, not with power, but with a soldier who stayed, and a princess who chose to be human, and a mother who learned, at last, how to love. Weeks after the birth of Naila, the fragile peace that had settled over the desert borderlands began to fray at the edges like sun-bleached cloth. Whispers slithered through the corridors of the celestial spire, rumors of dissent among the Azure High Council, of exiled generals plotting in the outer rim colonies, of human settlements still nursing old wounds and deeper suspicions. But none of that prepared Chiron for the day the sky cracked open. It began with a tremor so faint most dismissed it as seismic drift. But Lysara felt it in her bones. She stood on the palace balcony, Naila sleeping against her chest, and stared eastward where the twin suns met the horizon. Her skin dimmed, a rare sign of distress among her people. "Something's wrong," she murmured. Chiron, sharpening a ceremonial dagger he'd been gifted as a wedding token, looked up. "What is it?" Before she could answer, the ground bucked violently. The palace chimed with alarm, the azure equivalent of a siren, a harmonic resonance that vibrated through stone and bone. Across the desert, a second sun bloomed. Not warm, not golden, but cold and blue-white, casting sharp, skeletal shadows. A warship, one not of azure design, descended through the atmosphere like a blade through silk. It bore no insignia, no registry, only a single glyph burned into its obsidian hull, a spiral with 9 eyes. "The obsidian conclave," Vera whispered, appearing beside them, her face pale beneath its cerulean sheen. She hadn't worn her battle armor in months. Now it materialized around her in rippling plates of living metal, summoned by instinct. They were exiled centuries ago. Fanatics. They believe purity is only achieved through absolute separation. No unions, no hybrids, no compromises. Chiron's blood ran cold. "They're here for Naila." Lysara tightened her grip on her daughter, her breath coming fast. "They see her as an abomination." The ship hovered, silent, then launched a pulse. A soundless, invisible wave that shattered every communication crystal in the palace and knocked out the energy shields across the border. Within minutes, drones the size of vultures swarmed the skies, their lenses scanning, hunting. Chiron didn't hesitate. He snatched Naila from Lysara's arms. "Take your mother and get to the underground vaults. I'll draw them away." "No!" Lysara cried, grabbing his wrist. Her touch sent a jolt through him. Not electric, but emotional, raw and desperate. "You can't. They'll kill you. They'll kill all of us if they find her," he said, pressing a kiss to Naila's forehead. Her golden eyes blinked up at him, calm, trusting. "She's not just your daughter, Lysara. She's the future, and I'll die before I let them erase her." Before Lysara could argue, Vera stepped forward. Her expression was grim, but her eyes held something new. Respect. "There's a tunnel beneath the old observatory," she said, handing Chiron a small, glowing orb. "It leads to the ruins of Dusthaven. The Conclave won't expect you to go back to human territory. Use this, it'll mask your biosignature for 12 hours. Chiron nodded. "Thank you." Lysara threw her arms around him, weeping silently. "Come back to us," she begged. "I always do," he whispered. Then he ran. The desert was no longer silent. It thrummed with the hum of drones, the crackle of energy nets, the distant screams of panicked civilians. Chiron kept to the dunes, using the ruined structures of old battlefields as cover. Naila remained eerily calm, cooing softly as if she sensed the danger but refused to fear it. Every so often, her tiny fingers would glow faintly, casting a soft golden light that Chiron quickly smothered with his cloak. He reached the edge of Dusthaven by nightfall, only to find it occupied. Not by the Conclave, but by human soldiers. Commander Rel Vosk, Chiron's former superior, a man who had once called him brother before the war turned them to ghosts, stood atop a scorched hover tank, his eyes blazing with fury. Behind him, 100 armed men and women trained their plasma rifles on the ruins. "Traitor!" Rel spat as Chiron emerged from the shadows, hands raised. "You abandoned your people for blue-skinned monsters, and now you bring their spawn to our home." "She's not a monster," Chiron said, holding Naila closer. "She's my daughter." Rel laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "You think love ends wars? Look around, Chiron. The Azure may have stopped bombing us, but they still own the skies. They still control the water. We sleep in fear every night, wondering if their kindness is just another kind of chain." Before Chiron could respond, a drone whirred overhead. Rel's men opened fire. The drone exploded in a shower of sparks, but not before it broadcast their location. From the east, the obsidian ship turned. "They're coming," Chiron said urgently. "If you want to survive, help me hide her." Rel hesitated. His eyes flicked to Naila. For the first time, Chiron saw doubt in them, not hatred, but fear. Fear of what she represented. Fear of a world that no longer made sense. Then, a small voice. "Dada." Naila stretched a glowing hand toward Rel. The commander flinched, then froze. He'd lost his own daughter in the first wave of Azure attacks. A girl with dark curls and a laugh like wind chimes. Something in his face cracked. "Down here," he growled, jerking his head toward a hatch in the ground. "Old storm shelter, lead-lined, might block their scans." Chiron didn't question it. He followed Rel into the dark. Hours passed. The shelter was cramped, damp, filled with the scent of rust and old sweat. Naila slept, curled in Chiron's lap. Rel sat across from them, his rifle across his knees, his eyes closed, but not sleeping. Then, a new sound. Not drones. Not engines. Footsteps. Light, precise, echoing through the metal walls. Azure footsteps. Lysara appeared at the hatch, her hair wild, her eyes blazing. Behind her stood a dozen elite guards, loyalists who had defied the High Council to follow their princess. "You found him," she breathed, rushing forward to embrace Chiron and Naila. But Rel raised his rifle. "Hold," he said, voice tight. "How do we know she's not leading them to us?" Lysara met his gaze, unflinching. Because if I wanted you dead, I wouldn't have risked my throne to save your water purifier last month. Because I stood in the rain outside your refugee camp for 3 nights until you let me deliver medicine. And because, she glanced at Chiron, her voice breaking, I love a man who would rather die than let hate win. Rel lowered his weapon. Just then, the ground shook again. This time, it wasn't a ship, it was something bigger. From the heart of the desert, the sand began to rise. Not in dunes, in shapes, towering figures of living crystal, ancient war golems, buried for millennia, now awakening. Their eyes glowed with the same nine-eyed spiral. The conclave didn't just come to kill her. Vera's voice echoed from above. She dropped into the shelter, breathing hard. They woke the sand sentinels. They're trying to activate the Genesis core. Chiron frowned. What's that? The heart of the planet, Vera said grimly. If they activate it, it'll purge all non-pure life. Everything hybrid, everything mixed. It'll reset the world to original design. Billions will die. Humans, azure, hybrids, everything. Silence. Then Naila giggled and reached out again. This time, her golden light didn't fade. It grew, filling the shelter, warm and pulsing, like a heartbeat made visible. The light touched Rel's scarred hands, Lasara's blue skin, Chiron's weary face, and for a moment, they all glowed with the same soft luminescence. She's not just hybrid, Vera whispered, awe in her voice. She's a bridge, not just between species, but between worlds. Chiron stood, Naila in his arms. Then we don't hide. We fight. What can we do? Rel asked, voice rough but resolute. We go to the core, Lasara said. Together. And so, an impossible alliance formed in the belly of a ruined world. A human commander who had lost everything, an alien princess who had dared to love, a queen who had learned mercy, and a baby whose very existence defied extinction. They marched through the storm of drones and sentinels, not with weapons, but with something rarer. Unity. At the Genesis core. A churning mauve light beneath the desert's heart. The conclave's leader, High Inquisitor Zareth, stood on a platform of black stone, chanting in a dead tongue. The sentinels knelt before him, their crystal bodies humming with destructive power. Fools! He shrieked as they approached. You bring the abomination here? She will be the first to burn. Chiron stepped forward. Naila held high. She's not an abomination, he said, voice ringing with quiet strength. She's what comes after war. She's what grows in the cracks. Zareth laughed until Naila reached out. Her golden light touched the nearest sentinel. The golem froze. The spiral eyes flickered, then changed. From 9 cold eyes to 1 warm golden one. One by one, the sentinels turned. Not toward Zareth, but toward Naila. The Inquisitor screamed as his control shattered. The core began to destabilize, not to purge, but to transform. The light turned from blinding white to soft gold. The ground trembled, not with destruction, but with rebirth. Vines of living crystal burst from the sand, blue and green and gold, twining together like hands clasped in promise. Zareth tried to flee, but Rel tackled him. Not to kill, to arrest. She deserves a trial, Rel said. Not vengeance. Lasara kissed Chiron's cheek. You've changed us all. He looked down at Naila, who babbled happily, her fingers sparking tiny stars in the air. No, he said softly. She did. In the weeks that followed, the Genesis core became a sanctuary, not a weapon. The Sand Sentinels, now guardians, patrolled the borders, not to enforce but to protect. Human and Azure engineers worked side by side to build a new city on the desert's edge, half crystal, half steel, where children of all kinds played beneath twin suns. Chiron was offered a seat on the new council. He refused. I'm not a politician, he told Lasara one evening, as they watched Naila chase fireflies that glowed blue and gold. I'm just a man who loves his family. Lasara leaned into him. That's more than enough. Vera, now retired from rule, though still fiercely loved, spent her days teaching Naila the old songs of the Azure, while Rel taught her how to build radios from scrap metal. And every night, before bed, Naila would place a hand on her father's chest and one on her mother's, and whisper, in a voice too old for her years, "Stay." And they always did, because the war was truly over. Not because they won, but because they chose, every day, to love harder than they had ever hated. And in that choice, the galaxy found its next beginning. The years turned like desert winds, gentle at first, then fierce, then soft again. Naila grew, not just in height but in wonder. By the time she was 6, she could make the desert flowers bloom with a touch, coaxing them into spirals of silver and gold that hummed lullabies when the wind passed through. She spoke 3 languages: Azure, human, and the quiet tongue of the sentinels, whose crystal limbs now stood like ancient trees across the borderlands, their bodies woven with vines and light. She didn't see differences between people. She saw colors, sounds, feelings, and to her, a human's laugh was no different from an azure's chime. Both were music. Chiron never took a title, never wore a crown. He stayed a mechanic, fixing hover trucks in the market square of the new city they called Aleph, a word meaning, where the stars remembered. He built things with his hands. Toys for children, irrigation systems for farms, even a tiny musical box that played the melody Lasara had hummed the night they met. He still wore his old boots, cracked and patched, because they reminded him where he'd been and how far he'd come. Lasara, once the heir to a throne, became the keeper of memory. She traveled between settlements, recording stories, not of battles or kings, but of kindnesses. The human mother who shared her last water ration with an injured Azure child. The Azure elder who taught a group of orphaned humans how to weave light into fabric. The day Naila gave her first smile to Rel Vosk, and he cried so hard he dropped his rifle. Vera, now called the first mother by the people, lived in a small house near the edge of the dunes, where the wind carried the scent of desert lilies. She spent her mornings pruning the vines that now grew from the core, their roots deep in the planet's soul. She didn't need a throne anymore. She had Naila's laughter. She had Chiron's quiet presence at her table, eating her terrible stew with a grin. She had Lasara's arms around her at night, whispering, "I'm still your daughter, even if I'm not your princess." And Rel? He became the first human Azure ambassador, though he still preferred to be called Captain by the kids who climbed on his lap during story hour. He never remarried, but he raised 2 foster children, one human, one hybrid, and taught them how to fix engines, how to stand tall when others looked down, and how to listen before they spoke. Naila turned 12 on the day the twin moons aligned perfectly over Aleph, painting the city in a single, shimmering hue of silver and gold. The entire population gathered in the central square, not for ceremony, but for celebration. Children danced with sentinels. Elders sang old songs in 2 voices. Chiron played the musical box he'd made, and for the first time, Naila joined him, her fingers tracing patterns in the air that made the music swell into something alive, something whole. When the song ended, she stepped forward, barefoot on the warm stone, and looked out at the crowd. "I don't want to be a queen," she said, her voice clear as a bell. "I don't want to rule. I just want to keep making things grow." A murmur rose, not of surprise, but of love. Then, from the back of the crowd, a small boy, no older than 5, stepped forward. He had dark skin, one blue eye, one brown, and hair that shimmered like twilight. He held out a small clay bird he'd made. "I made this for you," he whispered. Naila took it gently, then she kissed his forehead. The bird glowed, and then it flapped its wings and flew. The crowd gasped, then laughed, then cheered. Chiron wiped his eyes. Lasara leaned into him. "She's going to change the whole galaxy." "I know," he said, voice thick. "I've known since the day she was born." That night, under a sky so full of stars it seemed to breathe, Chiron and Lasara sat on their rooftop, wrapped in blankets woven from sentinel's threads, Naila asleep between them, her small hand clutching Chiron's finger. "I think," Lasara murmured, "we're the luckiest people in the universe." Chiron looked down at her, her blue skin glowing softly in the moonlight, her hair like liquid sapphire, her eyes still holding the same fierce, Tender light they had the day she saved a human child in the desert. "I don't think we were lucky," he said. "I think we chose it. Every day. Even when it hurt. Even when it scared us. We chose each other." She turned her head, kissed his cheek. "I still love you," she whispered. "I still love you," he replied. And then, as if the universe itself had been waiting for the words, the stars above them began to pulse. Not randomly, but in rhythm, pattern, a song. The same melody Naila had made with her hands earlier that day. Vera, watching from below, smiled. Rel, on his porch, paused mid-sip of tea. Even the sentinels, standing silent and tall across the dunes, tilted their crystalline heads, as if listening. It was the sound of peace. Not the silence after war, but the music after silence.